Hi guys, so today we're going to look to the past. We're going to look at Edward VIII's chart. He's famously the king that abdicated the throne in favour of marrying Wallis Simpson, who was a divorcee and who the British establishment and the government wouldn't allow him to marry because she was a divorcee at the time. That was scandalous to the institution. So he actually gave up the throne in order to marry her. So it's a tale of ascension, very short ascension, and also quite radical for the time. It had never been done before, a king abdicating. So it kind of caused a constitutional crisis in Britain at the time. It was a big deal. So yeah, we're going to look at the timing around when he became king, and then the timing around when he abdicated the throne. We're also going to look at some eclipses as well. They play a significant part. And not only do they play a significant part in Edward's life at the time, they are also kind of relating back into the present moment. So eclipses are part of families. There's families of eclipses, and they're known as Saros cycles. So every 18 years, the same eclipse family repeats. So there's eclipses that happened in 1936 that are repeating now in 2026 and early 2007. So it kind of relates to my first video about Prince William, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But first we're going to look at the natal chart, the natal promise, which is the birth chart of Edward VIII. So he was born at 2155 on the 23rd of June 1894. And he was born at night, so therefore in terms of sect, his sect light is the moon. So this is like his light leader. The planets that work on the night team are Mars and Venus. And then Mercury over here, it goes both ways, but because it falls behind the sun, which means it's an evening star, it hadn't yet risen before the sun, which would make it a morning star. So these planets here are all connected. They're on the same team, and that concept is known as sect. So those planets are sort of going to work more in favour and more easily for Edward, so to speak. Now, Edward is a Capricorn rising, so the rising sign here is in 24 degrees of Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Saturn's up here. Saturn is what's known as the out-of-sect malefic, meaning that it's the malefic that is going to cause kind of the most trouble, or the most, the most trouble for the native, meaning Edward. And because it's his ascendant ruler, Saturn represents Edward in the chart. Saturn here is in the 10th house. It's in the sign of Libra of his exaltation, and it's what's known as stationing. So it's standing still in the sky at the time. It's about to turn direct, so it's about to go into forward motion. So Saturn exalted is a good Saturn, but it's also the ascendant ruler and the malefic contrary to sect. So what we have here is mixed condition. It's in the 10th house, it's very prominent, suggesting elevation and being of high regard, but it's also the malefic contrary to sect, which indicates that sometimes when you have the ascendant ruler, which is the malefic contrary to sect, it indicates sometimes the native can work against themselves and not perhaps go the usual route. But it's still a very powerful Saturn because it's in the 10th house there. But yeah, that station as well is very prominent. It indicates a life that's going to be saturated with Saturnian kind of themes, which can include responsibility, institutions, the norm, very much, the monarchy, something that endures. Traditions. Saturn's all about traditions. So the fact that it's stationary, it's showing that Edward as a person, as the native, is doing something that's a little bit different yeah, so that's the natal chart. Oh, we also, sorry, have the MC. It's over here in the 12th house. There's a lot of parallels between Prince William's chart. A lot of royal charts have a lot of similar placements. That's why the royals are so fascinating, because a lot of signatures kind of repeat. So his MC degree, which rules the career, what you're known for, what you do in the world, is in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by the planet Jupiter. So Jupiter's over here in Gemini, which is the sign of its detriment. It's the sign that it's in. Jupiter likes to be in Sagittarius, so being in the sign opposite is what's known as, trying to be fancy there again, and again, line tool. It's in the sign opposite in Gemini, so it's going to be a little bit more disorganized, inconsistent. It's going to go a different route. Planets in detriment tend to have to navigate the topics they're responsible for, which is the MC here, in a different way. They're not going to go the usual route. So it sort of speaks to Edward's life in a lot of ways. So that's the natal chart. What we're going to first look at is progressions. So let's get the progress chart up. So this is going to be the progress chart for when Edward became king, when his father died, making him the new king. So it's 20th of January 1936. So progressions, again, are a symbolic timing technique. They are used to show very unique circumstances that are interacting with the natal chart. It's each day after birth, each subsequent day, where the planets were on that day are compared to the natal chart. So they're showing this progression as each day after after the birth. It's showing how the life is unfolding in a very unique way. So with Edward, what we have very prominently is Pluto over here is on the Descendant, this Descendant angle here. So, or not Pluto, sorry, Mercury. Mercury is on the Descendant. Now, Mercury in the chart rules the 6th house and also rules the 9th house. So the planets are in charge of different sectors of the chart. Also, interestingly, Mercury rules the IC. So the IC is the lowest point of the chart. It's like the roots of the chart. It shares similar associations with the 4th house. The IC in whole sign houses, it can float between the 2nd all the way to the 6th, just like the MC degree can float all the way from the 12th to the 9th. It's most commonly from the 11th to the 9th, and the IC is the mirror point of the MC, so they're the same point, just opposite, and it can float in the 3rd to the 5th. But you do sometimes get it into the 6th house. So Mercury, progressed Mercury is on top of the Descendant, and Mercury rules the 6th and the 9th and the IC degree. So IC degree is about roots and family. So what it's saying here, progressed Mercury is conjoining an angle, and whenever a progressed planet conjoins an angle, it's turning those significations that Mercury represents like online. It's coming into prominence. The Descendant as well is where the sun sets. So if a planet is on the Descendant, it is indicative of something is setting, something is ending. Like the sun rises over here in the east, and then the sun sets in the west over here. So it can indicate endings, and to me this is indicating, because it rules the topics of the IC, so it rules the father, the home, the family. It's showing here that Mercury, representing the IC, the father, is coming to an end. So it's the signification of mercurial topics and what Mercury rules in the chart coming to an end. It's like the setting. So yeah, I think that's indicative of his father's life ending. and his home life changing, literally his family changing. It also rules the 6th house, which is the house of service and labour. And it also rules the 9th house, which is, it's a lot of things, but it's known as the house of God. Like in my previous video, it also talks about kings. It has an ancient association with that because the sun had its joy there. So yeah, there's multiple kind of factors going on here, but this progression lasts for about a year. So it's this kind of overlay of this year in Edward's life. Mercury as well in the natal chart, which is here, it's setting as well. So it's almost like this natal promise is coming to fruition. Because Mercury there is at 27 in the natal chart and the Descendant's at 24. But by progression, the progressed Mercury would have retrograded and then it would have went direct again. So that's why it's hitting that descendant angle again. Yeah. So that's the progressed Mercury. Also, he is in a crescent phase, or is just about to enter a crescent phase. So he's leaving that new moon phase and going into a crescent phase in the 4th of May. So a couple of months from whenever his father died and he became king. So the crescent phase is about emergence. Now the full moon phase in progressions is quite powerful. It speaks to a lot of visibility. But in Edward's case, this crescent moon, I think, was indicating that this is the start of a new cycle, but he wasn't quite there in terms of full peakness or full visibility. So to me, it's indicative of, yes, the moon is growing a light, it's gaining strength, but it's not at full peak, kind of indicating maybe his short-term reign as a king. Yeah, so that's the progressions for whenever he became king. And now we're going to look at the transits. So now transits is a real-time technique. Progressions is symbolic. So at the time of his ascension, this was what was actually going on in the sky. And we're going to bring it back to the 20th of January, 1936. So I hope you're following. I know this is a lot of information, but kind of in client work, this is what I use. Like we're using multiple timing techniques to kind of tell a story. And obviously it's easier when you look back in retrospect. I acknowledge that. It's easier to see the signs, but whenever you're in consult with someone, that's why it's so important to ask questions and gather lots and lots of information, because with more context, you can kind of understand what's going on and what the symbols are trying to tell you. So yeah, these are the transits for January 1936 when he becomes king. So straight away, the one that jumped out to me first was Pluto conjunct Mercury. So that Mercury, what we talked about in secondary progressions, it's the ruler of the IC. So Pluto is literally transformation. It can be transformational death, or it can be physical death. It can be crisis. It can be things being uprooted, going deep with things. So there is this sense of endings and great changes and great transformations in regard to IC matters, so his family, his home. Jupiter as well is over here at 15 degrees of Sagittarius, and it's making an opposition to his natal Jupiter. So Jupiter rules the MC degree. So that's me trying to be fancy. Get the circle. So Jupiter rules his MC degree. So transiting Jupiter is making contact with his natal Jupiter, which is stimulating the topics of the MC. And Jupiter is also all about expansion and says yes to things. So combine this with that Pluto transit, and it's stimulating the IC. It's showing that there's something around career topics and life direction. Yeah, and also Mercury is very important at this time, because at this time he was in a 6th house profection year. So profections are another symbolic timing technique. They go around the chart, and each year of life, a house gets activated. So it kind of goes round and round and round and round and round forever until the person passes away. But at that time, he was in a 6th house profection year. So it's activating the 6th house. Now, Gemini rules the 6th house, so that Mercury is becoming extra important, and it's linking back there to that secondary progressed Mercury. Mercury keeps showing up. And also the 6th house contains his Jupiter, which rules the MC. So topics of the career are going to be activated. Topics surrounding the IC are going to get activated. Transiting Pluto's on top of the Mercury. Also, Neptune over here, 16, is squaring his Jupiter. Sorry, I'll make that a bit clearer. It's going back and forth by degrees through retrogrades. It's going to go over that Jupiter. That'll become more important later with his abdication. But it's interesting to point out that that kind of influence is starting to stir. Neptune's all about dissolving and kind of washing away. So you also see this kind of story playing out where Neptune's coming along and challenging those topics surrounding the life direction and career, and what Edward does in the life is known for, his public facing role. So yeah, Neptune's going to be important later when we look at the abdication. What else did I have? Yeah, I think that was it for transits. Time Lord. Yeah. That's all for his ascension to the throne. Now we're going to look at his abdication. So let's clear the screen and then get up his progressions for the abdication. I hope you're following along. I know it's a lot of information. It's just fun to look back and see how timing techniques can be used with past charts. And his was such a unique case. Nothing had been done before like that, especially for a woman he loved and wanted to marry. So yeah, now we're looking at the progressions. So he abdicated, he signed the abdication, act of abdication on the 11th of December. So the progression is really interesting with him at this time. So the first progression was, we have, let's get the tool up, we have Mars coming to square the ascendant and the descendant, because these are polar opposite points. So what does Mars say come to the angle, especially by square? So Mars is a planet that is all about action. It's all about energy. Mars is in Aries in his natal chart. So Mars is domiciled. It's very well resourced. Mars is at home in the sign of Aries. It does what it wants to do. Mars in Aries is, I want, I will do, I do it. So when it makes an angle and it's interacting with the ascendant degree and the descendant degree, it's showing that Martian topics are going to influence the life. They're coming online. Mars rules the 4th house. The 4th house is associated with family, just like the IC. And Mars, imagine Mars is kind of like a surgeon's knife. It can cut away it can cut away bad things to save a life, or it can cut things away in a dangerous way, in a life-threatening kind of way. So it's like kind of this dual symbol. It cuts away for good, or it can cut away for bad. But when it's in Aries, it does what it wants to do. So this is kind of indicating that, you know, Edward here is, his life is, it's being decisive. It's making this cut, you know, this cut for the woman he loves. In order to marry him or marry her, he has to give up the throne. So that Mars is really prominent. It's going to stimulate his life around this time. It's going to be very active. That kind of energy is going to be saturating his life for about 18 months. Mars progressions are roughly 18 months. So yeah, that's the first progression we have for him. It's in the 4th house as well. Natally, Mars actually is trining the MC degree. So its significations natally, it's showing something here about, you know, there being a cut towards the career. Something's ending, something gets cut away. So that's interesting too. And what we had next was, so the moon up here, which is the sect light, it was actually conjunct the south node. So a moon by degree is only really, it depends how fast the moon's going by progression, but generally it's 1 degree 1 month. So literally the moon's at 5, the natal south node is at 5. So the south node is all about draining away. It's about draining out. It's all about things ending. It's more about ending than beginnings, or in a very simple adjective to describe it, is just it decreases. So whatever touches it decreases, and the moon for Edward is his sect light, so it's secondary kind of career indicator. It's the light that is in charge of the chart. So the moon coming to the south node is indicative of loss. It's indicative of that light, that sect light, that luminary light being depleted and taken away. So it's indicative of someone losing a position of great authority. It's also in the 10th house there as well, so it's speaking to the public visibility. The 10th house is all about, like the MC degree, the 10th house is indicative of what you do in the world. It's the very public, so it's a very public letting go. Yeah, so that was all I had for progressions. So we had the Mars, and then we had kind of that Mars natal promise coming to fruition, and then we had the sect light being conjunct the south node, and then we're going to move on to transits. Also that Mercury is still there at 24, so it's still, those IC topics are still in play. It's just that this Mars and this moon have come into play now, so it's adding to the story. Yeah, so now we'll look at transits. So transits, and then we have 11th of December 1936. So yeah, he was only king for literally not even a year, which is kind of mad when you think about it. So yeah, these are the transits for his abdication date, 11th of December. So what I'll first start off with is he was born on the 23rd of June. So he was transitioning from a Gemini profection year to a Cancer profection year. So this is really important. So we're moving from what we talked about before, the Gemini, 6th house of service, activating the IC, activating Jupiter, and then we're moving to a 7th house year. The 7th house is ruled by Cancer, which is ruled by the moon down here in the 3rd house. And yeah, so once again, we have this Cancer is activated. So anything transiting that 7th house is going to be extra important. And that Pluto there is still on top of that Mercury. It's retrograding back over it again. So that's important. Speaking again to those IC topics. Now, the big transit's happening for him. Like I said before, we're talking about that Neptune up here at 18. It's now stationed. It's right on top of his Jupiter by square. So it forms a square here. And then we have a square forming, a square aspect forming between Saturn here as well, which is at 16. Oops. How can I get the eraser? There. So we have Saturn here making a square to the Jupiter, and we have Neptune making a square to the Jupiter. And Jupiter rules the MC angle, like we talked about, so career. Also, Mars up here is coming across Saturn, which represents Edward himself. So Mars again is indicative of cutting, something ending, something being taken away. So yeah, there's a lot going on here, especially the Neptune and the Saturn. Their squares are hard aspects, so they're going to be really telling. Saturn, like we said, is also the malefic contrary to sect, so it's going to impose its harsher significations on top of that Jupiter. And Saturn's all about, like we talked about, limits, responsibilities, and primarily endings. It ends things, and Neptune up here washes things away. So they're in opposition together, and then they're squaring the natal Jupiter. So it's pretty indicative of something surrounding the MC and MC topics ending. Yeah, and that moon is really important because, like I said, he's in a Cancer profection year. So up here, and then the moon's down here. The moon natally, it represents Wallis, because the 7th house is about partnership. So whenever a 7th house perfection year gets activated, the topics of that house are going to play a role. So anything to do with partnerships. And funny enough, the moon makes a trine. Sorry, not a trine, it makes a square aspect to the natal MC. So whenever a planet makes an aspect to an angle within 3 degrees, it's going to speak to, it's going to impart things onto that MC angle. So what it's saying here is that the partner, or who Edward chooses to marry or be involved with, is going to speak significantly to his public life and what he's known for. And the square aspect is one of friction. The moon is also the sect light as well, so it's saying something here doubly about the light of the chart is intimately connected with 7 house matters. Also as well, that through his abdication, his sibling became king, King George. So there's doubling up. The 3rd house is all about siblings as well. So 7th house activated. 7th house represents partnerships. Wallis is represented by the moon, and also the moon is in the 3rd house, so it's connected to siblings, and then the moon is aspecting the MC. So there's a lot of like layers going on here. Pisces rules the 3rd house, so Jupiter is representative of his brother and also is representative of the MC angle. So the topics of siblings, the topics of the career and life direction are intimately connected in his chart. Like I said before, Jupiter is in Gemini, which is the sign of its detriment. So it's indicative of things not going the usual route. yeah, so there's a lot here, and Jupiter, or sorry, the moon, which represents Wallis, and the partner, because it rules the seventh house. It's in the third house. The moon's in its joy there, and I found curious that when I was doing research that after after he abdicated and he married Wallis, they kind of became these wanderers around Europe. They never really had a home, like a hometown or a settled home. They relied a lot on invitations from people and people hosting them. They also made really bad decisions by visiting certain people in certain countries at the time, like visiting Germany. But yeah, the moon itself is kind of this wandering planet. It's always shifting, always constantly moving. And Pisces as a sign generally there's a meandering quality to it. It's a mutable water sign, so it's kind of water that's constantly in flow and not having quite a fixed direction. So yeah, I thought that was interesting in terms of describing Wallis. His wife became eventually. Another interesting fact is the MC as well is in the 12th house. The 12th house as well is known as the house of bad spirit. It was also known as the house of exile. The 9th house has themes of being abroad, but the 12th specifically has themes surrounding exile and being far away from home. So yeah, the MC degree being there in the 12th house speaks to the life direction and being known for, being also in a place of exile. And that's doubled up by the fact that Jupiter is in Gemini, like I said. Planets in detriment are also known as planets in exile. So he was literally known for being displaced in other countries. He wasn't very welcome after his abdication in Britain. So yeah, that was kind of all I wanted to say about the abdication. I thought those transits were really cool, the way they kind of speak on multiple levels. The last thing I want to touch on, and I know this video is getting quite long, so I want to wrap up soon, is the eclipses. So I'm going to bring up the eclipses. So we're going to look at solar eclipses specifically. So that's when an eclipse happens at a new moon. It's when the sun and the moon are together in the sky. The sun is blocking the moon's light, the moon is blocking the sun's light. So it's indicative of interruptions, things not going the usual way, great beginnings and great endings. So, like I said, he was fluctuating between profection years, or profection houses. So he was in a Gemini year, profection the first half of the year before his birthday in June, and then he was in a Cancer year towards the end. So Ascension basically was the Gemini profection, and then he was in a Cancer profection in the Abdication latter half of the year. So this all happened in 1936. So there's an eclipse that happened on the 19th of June in 1936, and this belongs to the Saros cycle 1 to 6, and this is the same Saros cycle that's repeating in August of 2026 in the sign of Leo. So the Saros cycles don't have to repeat in the same signs, but they are the same eclipses. They are the same family, but they can be in different signs. They move over the years. So yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting that there was an eclipse that happened in the year 1936 that is repeating again now in 2026. So it kind of relates back to my first video about Prince William. So themes of constitutional crisis. I think it's pretty evident that the royal family at the minute are going through something that's perhaps maybe on the same level as Edward's abdication. It seems pretty pivotal. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. And then that eclipse is also in the sign of the IC, which we talked about a lot. So it's activating themes of the IC, it's activating Jupiter. So it's just a doubling up there on the transits and the symbolic timing that we looked at. And then the next eclipse that happened was... there was many eclipses in between, but we're just focusing, on solar eclipses. There's always a lunar eclipse as well that follows the solar eclipse. But the next eclipse we're going to look at is... So there's the lunar eclipse in the 7th house and the 4th of July, which is important as well because he had met Wallis by this time. So that's how the house is getting activated in a profection year as well. But the one we're going to look at here is the solar annual eclipse in Sagittarius at 21 degrees of Sagittarius. And this is directly opposite, not directly opposite, sorry, it's within 3 degrees, but to his Jupiter as well. So it's pinging again the planet Jupiter, and the south node is there. So the south node, like we talked about, is a point that indicates release and endings. And also this eclipse happens in the sign of the MC as well. So multiple layers there. I'll not go into what they represent again. We've covered that. And then this Saros cycle, this eclipse belongs to the Saros cycle 131. So 131. And then this is repeating again in February of 2027 in the sign of Aquarius in 2027. So yeah, there's two eclipse families are repeating, and eclipse cycles repeat every 18 years. So this is astronomical. It's not, it's an astronomical occurrence. So it's a predictable occurrence, but it's interesting that Saros cycle 126 and Saros cycle 131 both occurred within the year that King Edward abdicated, and the eclipse happened. This eclipse happened on the 13th of December 1936, which was 2 days after he abdicated. So it's pretty close, and pretty indicative of great endings and great beginnings. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight those Saros cycle themes because they are repeating now. In the year 2026 with the August eclipse, and then one in 2027, in February 2027. So I just thought it was interesting that my first video about Prince William, his timing is kind of the latter half of 2026. So when I saw this repeating eclipse that happens in February 2027, and then the August time frame, I'm just seeing that the latter half of 2026 and the beginning of 2027, there's something, I feel like there's something happening there. So yeah, really fascinating, really interesting. I'm going to end it there because we've went on quite long. But yeah, you can catch me over at astrologybyaaron.com if you want to get a one-on-one consultation. I'm open for bookings. I'm generally available on Sundays, so have a look if you're really interested. But thank you so much for watching. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your comments, and if you have any suggestions about what you'd like to see next, pop them in the comments and I'll be glad to have a look. Thank you so much, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.